So, thanks, Commissioner, for this speech. We will now wrap up the conclusions of the sessions we had yesterday. I did it. Sorry. Oh, yeah. What video? Sorry. That's afterwards. Sorry. I was right. Sorry. No, it's okay. So yesterday we had these deliberative sessions, and as I said, it's your forum, it's about your discussion, it's about your inputs exchange between the islands. And so we find it very important to hear from each other what the conclusions are, so we can take them with in this journey of the 30 for 30, which has just been announced in the video. And so, because all of these aspects are important for us to keep working on, to keep discussing on. This is just a moment in a longer trajectory where these themes become important. So I will now welcome on the stage the rapporteurs from each of the sessions. And so I would start with the habitability session. And I don't know who exactly is the rapporteur, but voila, I think Maarten, I welcome you to the stage, and we can listen to your conclusions. Grab a mic. Yeah.
Thank you. Does the mic work?
Yes.
Yes, so we had a session on habitability, a new word for me. But very important on the islands, of course. And many things were said. There were some nice presentations, amongst others from the Åbo University that has a different approach, complementary, I would say, to the SDG approach, where they didn't fully recognize everything happening on islands. Also some nice examples from the Aran Islands, where simple, concrete things are happening. Some key takeaways are, I think, habitability is a challenge. Looking at the number of inhabitants, sometimes winter number of inhabitants and summer number of inhabitants, including tourism, is a very, very high ratio. Some are being so that puts a strain on facilities needed, and also in relation to, let's say, budgets. I mean, people who have a house, of course, they pay taxes, but for second houses, these regulations are often different and give you different budgets, which makes it challenging. So I think that's one topic. And all the facilities go beyond, let's say, electricity and houses and schools and public services. Money and local control was an important issue. There was some discussions on we don't want sort of a big utility to determine from a very remote office what's happening here. Community ownership is important to feel control over habitability and be able to adapt to local needs. So I think that was a second key takeaway. And the third one, we brought the discussion a bit back to energy. Was a bit challenging. Next to let's say the capex and the investment, which was I would say overcomable. There were big issues with serviceability, which is a different perspective on islands. I mean, easy access is not that simple. So that's a challenge. And also, getting the right solutions to complement what we have today. I mean, everyone has some solar panels on the roof. Let's make life a bit simple. But the next steps towards 100% are maybe a bit more complex. So that's where a lot of work, a lot of knowledge, competence needs to be brought together and within the reality of islands.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from those who did not attend the session? On this, you can come in each time. I should have announced that before, but if you want, you can always give a comment now and come in on that. Good. Then I invite the rapporteur of the offshore wind session to come here. You can stay. Although, but you can also go and sit. That's going to be.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'll try my best to convey what we discussed yesterday in the offshore wind session. please help me, those who were present. Just fire away and comment. So my take on it, the group's take on it, we took some notes, and this might be a little bit colored by my own experience with offshore wind, being located on an island in Denmark, with offshore wind going off, on, up around the country and around the islands. Anyway, so we had a good presentation on the technical aspect on it. This is a complicated engineering structure that is feasible and is being developed and can go to floating. So we can see more offshore wind than we are already seeing in more remote locations than what we are seeing. The potential is higher in the north, so there is a geographical difference between the opportunities. So the north is favorable because of the depth of the sea. And then we heard a lovely example of how you can actually do it, because this is big money, hot topic, it's happening, big scale, the big corporates, the governments, the big players are getting involved. And then we heard a really, really good example from Estonia, how they're doing it. And the developer basically went to the government and say, hey, we want to pay the local governments who were within vision of this offshore wind farm. We want to give them part of the revenue. And the government was like, we don't understand. You want to pay extra taxes? You want to do something good? Why? And they insisted, and they worked out a model, and it was lovely. And suddenly the islanders, the communities being affected, I mean, within a vision of the offshore wind, were in favor. They liked it because there was money coming into their accounts, and they could do community projects. Anyway, so this is a complex energy system that we're setting up out at sea. No one really knows how to solve it. There's a lot of production going on, a lot of money, interest involved. How to offtake all this generation of renewable energy. The concept of energy islands coming up. Mind you, islands. Translating into existing islands, translating such as Bornholm in the case of Denmark, translating into artificial islands. Again, islands with 0 inhabitants, 0 governance in one case, and existing islands in the other case. So my take on the session, but please help me if I'm wrong here, is that the islands actually need to step up as communities and say, hey, we are here. You don't need to build artificial islands out in the North Sea. We have islands. Come to us. Work it out with us. We know it's complicated. We know we cannot offtake the entire energy production from a gigawatt scale production plant on a tiny island, but we can take some of it. It will help us. It will help you. Let's do it together. And if nothing else, part of the revenue should go to the affected communities, being coastal regions, islands. We need to collaborate, we need to share, we need to find ways of doing it as an energy system. I should stop, but please help me here. In sum, the key takeaway is that islanders are here, communities are here, they exist. Just come talk to us, I mean the islands, you, these forums, and let's work it out together in a fair, just, sustainable, energy system optimized, whatever way. I will
Thanks.
stop.
If I can, I would like to follow up with a question, because also in the previous rapporteur talked about community ownership is important for islands, and obviously moving to the gigawatt scale, this is getting a bit complicated because the capital amounts that are involved are just huge. And I was in Wind Europe Copenhagen, and there you see how big this offshore wind business has become, and how the plans are towards gigawatt. So, but we have examples of even community-owned offshore wind, small scale, and it also work. So don't you think, or don't you fear that the business of the gigawatts, which is there and rightly so, I mean, it fulfills another function, but it's sort of clouding a bit actually what can happen on a smaller scale as well, with a more direct impact for the islands. So one thing is to get your share of the gigawatts, the other is to sort of build your own megawatts. And try to make that work for your island in connection with, you know, some islands around or the mainland, whatever. So is that something that has been discussed, this issue of scale or issue of...
Yes, I mean, we realized in the group that it's extremely complex, and we don't have an easy fix. But as I gathered the conversation, the discussion we had yesterday, that there's no one has the easy fix. I mean, it's not an easy fix to construct an artificial island either. It's not an easy fix to run the big cables that we are looking into otherwise. So I mean, why not look at the existing infrastructure, so to speak? I mean, the islands that are there, and try to have an overall energy system optimizing kind of approach where we actually incorporate the islands into the system. So make small connections, not gigawatt scale energy coming into island of Ærø, but megawatt scale, and the rest going to the main grid. Why not consider it? When I raise these questions locally, they're like, but you don't understand that the offshore wind is there to save the national climate strategy. You should focus on the island climate strategy, but why not combine the two?
Yeah. Very good point. Thanks for that. And Maya, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, there were so many different layers that came out of this panel, actually, and whenever we were started to talk, there were more and more perception and layers. So one of the biggest question, at least from our side, is that the sea is actually maritime good and it belongs to everyone, not only to the islands. So also it's a question like who should get the beneficiary of using the islands and get funded from, of course, the one who see from the home that some sea is occupied, but also how it's affecting the touristic countries and every activities, especially fisheries, also as being a very important beneficiaries of everything. So there is a lot of complexity around the project and how it can be solved, which needs to be also developed by the countries. It would be great, for example, if the country are doing blue economy as such, like strategy of the blue economy in each country to realize what kind of the local context actually they have, because each sea and each country is can be very, very different. We have an examples on the centralized and decentralized management of these kind of the projects. So it really depends on the country if it's going to develop the special plans and say, okay, these are the places where you can develop these projects, or they are going to give the opportunity to the investors and say, you know better, you have money for doing the researches and you know better where you are going to get highest peaks of the wind production, so you can say to us what are the best options. So it's really, really changing, and we actually were thinking about it. Currently we have 3 different status of this kind of the projects. One are those who started 20 years ago and already have wind parks developed. One are those who are currently developing, and one are those who are going to start maybe in 10 years. So it really depends of which technology, which kind of the management system they are going to use, and then at the end how the islanders or any other habitant of the country is going to benefit from it.
Thanks, and behind you.
Hi, it's Ola from Croatia Island Movement. About your question, so I'm dealing with the community projects in Croatia, and all the time we have this, let's say, dilemma that big gigawatt projects are for big players and small projects are for community. You are tree huggers, you know. But remember, there is not one person who is in charge of gigawatts projects. It's companies or organizations, and inside organizations there are people, sometimes thousands of people. And what these organizations can learn from community projects is democratizations of the organizational structure. And that is the, let's say, one of the benefits of community projects is that everybody who is involved can have a voice, can say what's their opinion, and it's also included in the development of the projects. So I think that if there is a will, the way can be found how to, let's say, unify big projects and, let's say, small projects.
Thanks for that remark, and it makes me think that in my home country, Belgium, we don't have islands, although we might have an artificial island coming up. But in the new tender for the second concessions to be developed in the North Sea, the law prescribes now to have a tranche of ownership for cooperative movement or like a cooperative entity, so citizens can participate in the capital of the offshore wind. Now there's some discussion around that, there's pros and cons, and I'm not going to have that discussion here, but it's definitely something to look at if it's a way of being part of the gigawatts as well, knowing that citizen-led building of gigawatts is difficult, you need bigger organizations for that, but it doesn't mean it's excluded. You can find other ways and you can adapt to that situation. And I think for islands, this can also be a model where you say, okay, we associate some cooperative ownership into a bigger picture. That can be done. Yes? Well, we have Camille and then Alexis.
So it's Alexis from Samsung Academy. I just wanted to bring new news. So just for your information, a few days ago, the Danish government announced that there would be new areas for offshore on top of the energy islands and on top of the already designated areas for offshore development, up to 14 gigawatts, where the Danish state will own 20%. And that is a relatively new approach. So in the sense, the rationale was that the sea belongs to everyone, so everyone, all the citizens needs to have some, benefit from it. So on top of the 20% ownership, the selection of the developer would be on the basis of the annual concessions payments for the next few decades to the Danish state. So that would be the main criteria for selection. And well, you know that Samso is a very bottom-up approach, and the motivation and the the start of the process came from the community. So it was not Samso inviting developers to consider the community for benefit. So it was a completely different approach. But when we need to substitute so many fossil fuels and power plants, so we absolutely need also, massive renewable energy installations. So we need to have both. I fully agree with your comment before. That's it's two different things. On the one hand is industrial renewable, capacity and size, and on the other hand is community projects, and we need to have both.
Thanks, and obviously the biggest cooperative we're all part of is the state. Now there's also just reacting on that, and this focus on getting revenue back can be also a danger, because you're pushing then to the industrial. For a community-owned small-scale offshore wind park, it will be much harder to bring money back to the state. And so I think we need to balance that. There's other qualities or other criteria that can be put in. Then the one that pays the most to the state wins the capacity to develop offshore wind, because then you're pushing really towards the biggest squeeze, and the whole chain is following. It's feeling that. But okay, that's another discussion. Camille, you also wanted to come in. There's a. We can pass the mic.
I just wanted to share the example of the Galston Development Trust in the west coast of Scotland in the island of Lewis, who have gone into partnership with the region of the Western Isles for an offshore wind farm and some private developers. So what they are doing there is to make sure that a proportion of the profits of the offshore wind farm goes to the community that is the partner, and also offsetting the issue that it's affecting the community. So I think that this, in the same way as onshore wind farms have had to give some of the profits to the local communities, there's no reason why offshore wind farm could not also devolve some of the profits to local communities, and it would be great if that could be explored further.
Thanks. And last comment perhaps by Kostas?
Thank you. Well, yeah, we're used of having Denmark leading the way in this situation. So it is the news from Alexis are interesting, indicating possibly also examples from or the way that other member states would follow when it comes to offshore. And it is true that the sea doesn't belong only to the islands. I would say that it is very important for the islands to look into the possibility for job creation and actually work with the companies so during the installation, but also the operation of the systems and other systems that are their neighborhood, let's say, of the island, to have as many jobs for the islanders. So I would say that this is an important element besides of aiming for income or share of the income of the revenues.
Thanks, and in this year of skills, I think it's important to point that out. I mean, close to my hometown is Ostend, which is the service harbor for the Belgian offshore, and it's amazing the activity and the sort of the added value you get back from that. And just to finish there on an anecdote, because you say the Danes leading the way, in my first year actually in the job, in 2002, I studied the potential for offshore wind in the UK, and calculated, the cost of energy of offshore wind, and my conclusion was, this is horribly expensive. It is very expensive. So who's going to build this? And the English didn't, because they're very banking driven and very commercial. But the Danes started, and the Belgians started, and the Germans started, and they said, yes, it's horribly expensive, but we'll work our way through it, and we'll start the pioneering, we'll start the innovation, and then 15 years later, the UK, who obviously has some of the best resources in the world when it comes to offshore wind, they jumped on the wagon that the Danes and the Belgians and the others have created, and now it's the top location in terms of offshore wind. But they didn't do the pioneering industrially, and I think there's a story there about building the chains of supply, building the workforce, the specializations and so forth in these coastal areas that can benefit from it. And now I think that's the thing that needs to come back. But okay, that's just to conclude this part of the discussion, because we need to move on, I know, but I welcome the discussion also now on this. So we go to the third, which was decentralized cooling and heating. And I see a bit of a gender pattern emerging here in the rapportage, which I can't say I'm very pleased with, but you're welcome. So I don't know what happened in each of your discussions, but don't be shy. Anyway, you're welcome. Yes.
Yeah, I can't fix it now.
I know it's not working. No.
Yeah, perfect. Nothing I can do about the gender balance now, I'm afraid. So yeah, we spoke about decentralised heat and power. We started with a great presentation for a hospital in French Polynesia, where they have a cooling system for the hospital. I was quite fascinated. It has a coefficient of performance of 30, which is something that I have never had anything of the sort, so that was quite fascinating. But in terms of our conversation, the first thing that we spoke about was the fact that we can redesign buildings to require less heating and cooling, I think the best kilowatt is the kilowatt that you don't need. So if we can design our buildings not to need heating, not to need cooling, it's always the best way to go, and it should always be the first thing that you have in the conversation. How do we insulate our buildings? How do we ventilate our buildings? How do we not require this added energy? We also spoke quite a bit about centralised heating power alongside decentralised heating power, and it was quite interesting to discuss the fact that you need quite a lot of heating or cooling demand in one area to make it viable, and so that often means that you need quite a lot of people to sign up. So there's sort of this critical mass effect where at least a certain proportion of the community needs to buy into the project right from the start. And if they don't, you're unlikely to be successful. But the good news is there's quite a lot of options for small district heating schemes, and in a sense decentralised, centralised, decentralised heating systems. And so if you are able to put in a network, you can always green it later with other sources of heating and cooling that might be more efficient, more environmentally friendly. And I think the last point that we discussed was the fact that different areas have different needs. Some areas will need heating and cooling. Unfortunately, I come from Shetland. We don't really have much need for cooling, but quite a high demand for heating. So our houses require quite a lot of heating. So always consider wherever you are, the best option that's available to you might well be different from another area, and there's sort of no one-size-fits-all approach that will work for heating and cooling, and the specific needs of any area. So that was our conversation.
Thank you very much, and I also participated in part of the discussion, and I'm very pleased that we are looking into the heating and the cooling as well, because it's not only electricity. It cannot be stressed enough, and especially if we will together work on the 100% renewable energy islands, we do need to look at heating and cooling as well, and it will probably be more cooling in the south, more heating in the north. That's okay. So we can and we have some very good ideas, models, and practices that we exchanged. So are there any questions on this session? Someone who wants to add something, a clarification or anything? No? Okay, then we go to the next. The next was the afternoon session then, and it was about the nature. How to align nature and renewable energy developments, and I don't know who's the rapporteur on that. Okay, good. Please.
Well, it was about aligning.
Just
yes,
ignore.
So it's say there. Okay, so the main three conclusions from yesterday, it was interesting debate with a lot of participation, so I invite them to say something more else. But the first conclusion was that there is a great impact in when we deploy the renewables energy. This is an important conclusion, but we understood that it's possible to improve better policies to reduce such impact, you know. And the second conclusion is about the human factor, you know. All these impacts in our environments because we need to produce energy for our civilization, our industry, etc., you know. So in that way, it's important, you know, that we have to understand that the energy transition is not to stop fossils productions and just changing for renewables. We have to do something more else. We need to change, you know, our way of life is based of how do you say it? Of the model of homus economicus, you know, we are living for consumption, and we are a huge population, you know. So for the impact in our environment, we are the contradiction, the humans, you know. And sometimes it's interesting because we are talking about technology, we are talking about resources, but you know, the answer, we have the answer, you know, but in that way, as humankind, but every person, we can do something every day to reduce that impact. And finally, you know, it's another important aspect, is the not-for-profit economy, you know. Yesterday, many people said about it's important to deploy the renewables because provide profit, you know, to the societies. But sometimes it's important to understand that there are different models. For example, like cooperatives, energy communities, you know, where the profit is not the main topic, you know, first. And that's all, I think so. Paul, you want to say something more else, or our colleagues?
Thank you very much. And well, you haven't presented yourself or where you're from, but that might also be.
Yes, my name is Pablo. I'm from Spain. I'm coming from Arosa, Iceland.
Okay, thank you very much. It's important also to hear, you know, the variety of islands we have here. Are there any questions or comments on this topic? A very important topic, and I think we'll have to discuss this a lot more going forward, because obviously it's not only about energy. It's about the places we live. It's the nature. It's the development. It's squaring all this, and so I think we'll have a big discussion there, and already sometimes, you know, the conflict between renewable energy development and biodiversity is there, and we need to find solutions for that, because, you know, both are important. So I think it's a topic we'll definitely come back on. Unless there's questions or comments, no, then we would go to the session on funding financing, which was animated, I heard. So, and we have Camille. The gender balance is, you know, coming back.
Well, whenever I have discussed the clean energy initiative with my fellow small islanders, there's always one question that comes: where is the money coming from? What funding are we going to get? So I was very pleased to have gone to this session, because now I have an answer.
Okay.
The funding is there. It's out there, folks, both as public funding and through the market. And there's one caveat: we have to work a little bit hard to make sure that we have the right feasibility studies, we have good cash flow forecasts, and we have a comprehensive risk assessment covering all the risk associated with the projects. So if we get all that done, and if all our ducks are lined, funding will come forth. Guaranteed, as Amandine told us. And one thing also that was talked about that I didn't know anything about was these ESCOs, which are a particularly good, although overlooked, entry point for funding, as the long-term energy efficiency they provide ensures they pay for themselves. So it's particularly attractive to municipalities, regions, etc. One of the other points, and that was a very important point, was that for perfectly bankable projects to proceed and succeed, there needs to be buy-in by the local community and by the stakeholders. So it's absolutely essential and crucial that capacity building and public awareness sessions are built in as a requirement in any funding package or public tender to ensure that local communities and stakeholders are on board. And as Maya pointed out, this should also include the holistic and horizontal dimension of planning for energy transition, because it's not just about producing energy, heat or cooling, it's about how to make sure that everything is considered in the terms of the energy transition in what we do. So it needs a good understanding of such multi-sectoral approach and a good buy-in, and you can be sure that your projects that are bankable will succeed. The third point I wanted to make was to do with the Nesoi project. We had a very good presentation of the Nesoi project, which strongly demonstrated the interest of the smaller island communities in decarbonizing their economies. The one problem they have, all in common, is that very often the projects are too small to attract private investors in particular. So there's a really good highlighting of the real need to explore smaller investment envelopes to address that situation. And I'm very pleased that Edita mentioned that in her conclusion at that session. So we can go forth with more confidence, I think, now, thanks to this session and to the knowledge that we can expect the Secretariat to deliver for all our island communities.
Thank you very much. And indeed, it's a priority for us going forward with the 30 islands that will be selected to give that support to go and look for funding. The Secretariat doesn't have money to give. We only have advice and expertise to give. But one of these areas of expertise is definitely where to find the funding and so forth. And you heard the Commissioner will have the full support of the European Commission to look for the pockets of money that are out there to delve into. Are there any questions, remarks on this session? Yes? Zolan? Yeah, better to do the mic.
So let me be a devil's advocate here. So I was just share. You mentioned ESCO models. So we, as a cooperative in Croatia, we started with ESCO models, and we tried to involve municipalities. And sadly, we didn't succeed because their statement was like this: you know what? We have all these EU money, and it's like granted, and it's like 100%. So we will wait for this, and this ESCO model, we have to pay, and then it's a long-term deal. We will not use it. So that's the reason why lots of projects are like either are stopped or waiting for some magical wand to appear and give them money. So my, let's say, perspective is, if you can do it with your own money, do it. Don't wait for someone to come and give you money.
That's great advice. If you can, do it, but if you can't,
you
back to square one.
Just one thing. Nelson Mandela said it: everything is impossible until someone does it.
Okay. Great. Thanks for this inspirational quote. Good. Thank you very much, Camille. And then we have the last the session, which was on decarbonizing mobility, and we had a very technical discussion. So Petros, please.
And back to gender stereotypes. Sorry for that. We had a really rich discussion yesterday. We had an input from many islands. We learned about Estonia's efforts to turn to hydrogen. Greek examples from Greek islands about smart marinas, port infrastructure upgrade. From Arosa, we had this very fascinating experience with fishing fleets. And we also talked a lot about the electrical ferries in Denmark, and of course the hydrogen effort also in Genoa. So there seems to be a lot of solutions. What is the main point of the discussion, what is the basis where we start from, is that transportation at sea is a vital public service, a vital need. It's already subsidized a lot, and this creates a lot of room and a lot of space for innovation. Since we already subsidize fossil fuels, why not turn to also subsidize decarbonization and take advantage of the added value that comes with exploitation of either the hydrogen or the electricity. One of the main problems is the stakeholders involved. So either the port authorities that are not always there to support innovation, or the DSOs that need to invest a lot on the grid to provide electricity and capacity either for cold ironing or for shore-side charging, etc. These are stakeholders that need to be engaged and need to be really active in this procedure. There are regulatory restrictions. Stefano Barberis mentioned that in Genova, their hydrogen ship was at first allowed just to sail inside the port. So you understand that there's a lot of concern, a lot of fear about the safety at sea, and this is something, of course, understandable, but we need to convince the authorities that there is room for new approaches. And of course, also incorporating renewable energy is a big challenge. It's not just enough to say that okay, we get some green certificates for the electric vessels. We need to incorporate green generation in the ports and try to upgrade them. I think that's all from. And finally, yes, that both solutions, hydrogen and electrical ferries, are examined at the moment. There's not a clear advantage for one or the other. It seems that it's a lot based on the distances, of course, and the weight and the volume that you are allowed to have on board, and the technical parameters of each case. So that's all from us, I think.
Thank you, and we'll hear more about the technicalities this afternoon, hydrogen, battery, other ships, and how does it compare. On the site visit, there will be more about that. Any question or comment on this last one? Pau?
Yeah, I have a question, but maybe it will be answered this afternoon. It was about, I mean, I thought that hydrogen, to use hydrogen directly for ferries and big ships was not really feasible because it occupies a lot of space and you have to transform it into ammonia or something else. I was wondering, how do they want to deal with that, but maybe this afternoon.
I would propose to take it this afternoon also in the interest of time, because it is a big discussion. It's not. It sounds like a simple question, but so let's take this on this afternoon if you want. I want to also conclude here and also mention that the graphics you saw, based on the conclusions you made, were done by Agata from Think E. She's not here now, but while we were dining and having fun, she was making drawings yesterday evening. So big applause for Agata, as I think it's a wonderful visual presentation which will help us in remembering back to the conclusions, and we'll also use them on the website.